Describe the advent of e-pharmacy in India. The e-pharmacy sector in India has been witnessing a lot of startup activity. More than 200 startups have sprung up in this space, and some of them have gained considerable resources. For example, 1 Milligram has raised more than $50 million in seed funding from American private equity firms. MedLife, which is a similar startup, has raised over $30 million in order to expand its network and last-mile connectivity. PharmEasy, which is a relatively new entrant, has also been able to obtain $17 million in venture funding. The e-pharma startup space appears to be really heating up. Experts are predicting that some mergers and acquisition activity might take place to reduce the increasing number of startups that are entering this line of business. Let's now look at a real-life example to understand the challenges faced by the e-pharma industry. eHealth LLC is a new entrant in the field of e-pharmacy. Right now, it has started online ordering and home delivery of medicines only in the large cities. It has launched a dedicated website for each city that it caters to. Users can order their medicines online by uploading a photo or scan of their prescription, and the medicines get delivered within a few hours to them. Within 6 months of its launch, eHealth's management realized that there were hostile market conditions, as well as several other challenges that they had not considered. Let's take a look at some of the challenges that eHealth faces. Slow growth rate. The government is skeptical about e-pharma firms. This is the reason they keep a close watch on these firms. It is widely believed that giving a free hand to e-pharma firms might lead to drug abuse. This is because these firms are likely to sell habit-forming drugs without the correct prescription. This is the reason that eHealth has to be very careful about the drugs that they sell. The company rejects about 45% of the orders placed by the users due to the lack of a valid prescription. However, the same user can buy the drugs offline. This has led to dissatisfaction in users, and many of the new users do not return to the website. Since eHealth rejects orders on such a large scale, its growth rate is quite slow. Hurdles in integration. eHealth has also tried venturing into related businesses like diagnostics and lab testing. However, there are regulatory hurdles here as well. There are several laws which make it difficult for eHealth to have such vertical or horizontal integration. These restrictions are likely to have a severe impact on the valuation of eHealth. Investors in eHealth are well aware that they do not have any wiggle room. eHealth's operations are being straitjacketed. It is only allowed to sell some medicines to a certain group of customers. If it tries to expand its customer group or the medicines it's selling, it faces regulatory hurdles. Similarly, if it tries to enter a new line of business, it faces hurdles again. This lack of flexibility translates into lower valuations. Legality issues. eHealth is at a very nascent stage, largely because of the legal issues facing the companies. There is a complex regulatory environment for the sale of medicines online. Consumers are not sure whether eHealth, a startup company, will be able to comply with these regulatory norms. Also, due to the deep discounts being offered by eHealth, many consumers suspect that it might be selling counterfeit medicines. eHealth has now started registering all suppliers and manufacturers. This is being done to eradicate the suspicion that the company is selling counterfeit goods. Regulatory hurdles. eHealth wants to expand its business that will give them the necessary scale wherein they can negotiate with the suppliers to get better discounts. However, the rules and laws put in place by the government are very strict. Currently, eHealth has to obtain separate licenses for every state that it wants to sell medicines in. Also, they are required to have a physical presence in all states. This leads to increased costs for online retailers whose business model is dependent upon avoiding physical presence to keep costs low. eHealth finds it difficult to build an efficient supply chain which can bring down the cost of medicines and therefore add value to customers. eHealth wants to be able to operate with a single distribution license. It wants to be able to build interstate supply lines. Multiple laws. Another problem that eHealth is facing as a pharma company is that it has to comply with multiple laws. There are laws for conducting online business as well as the Drugs Act. Sometimes the provisions of these laws contradict each other. This creates ambiguity as well as more litigation costs for eHealth. You can understand that eHealth has a lot of potential to grow. However, it faces severe competition from the physical pharmacy store chains that are well connected and that have deep pockets. Also, the regulatory mechanism is not in their favor. Patents and the pharma industry. If we examine these two sides of the debate, it's indeed clear that both positions are strong and have valid points. For instance, the case for patents and their protection is strong since the pharma majors invest in R&D and drug trials, and the time to market is indeed long. However, on the other hand, the developing world also needs their concerns to be taken care of, since they have not reached a stage where their people can afford medication that is prohibitively expensive. Indeed, the fact that the rampant spread of HIV, human immune virus, among the third world countries is the strongest argument for leaving out the drugs to treat them from being patented and thereby ensuring cheaper access to the people for such drugs. Therefore, what we have is the situation that has been created wherein there is a heated debate between the proponents of patents and its opponents, with neither side willing to back down from their positions. This calls for some serious dialogue between them, as well as for the governments of the world to come out with steps wherein both the pharma companies and their citizens win in the bargain. For this to happen, both parties must be willing to concede ground and back down from brinkmanship. This can take the form of the pharma companies cross-subsidizing the expensive drugs, especially those that treat life-threatening conditions. Furthermore, they can also agree to a patent protection regime of 5 or 10 years instead of sometimes lifetime and sometimes decades-long protection, which they have at the moment. Apart from this, there can be better cooperation between the various pharma companies as that they undertake pro bono selling by differential pricing in their home countries and in the third world. The latter, in turn, can encourage their domestic companies to invest more in R&D and not just copy the drugs made in the West, which is the case in many of third world countries. Moreover, they can offset some of the losses of the Western pharma majors by absorbing some of the costs and letting the poor and the needy benefit in the process. Both these strategies are currently being followed in India, where the government subsidizes the HIV drugs in addition to many drugs that cater to life-threatening conditions. Perhaps the most optimal solution would be for the pharma sector itself, which again, using the example of India, wherein many Indian pharma majors often price their drugs in such a manner as to benefit the poor. Of course, the flip side is that unless the governments of third world countries make healthcare a right and ensure their commitment by improving the conditions in the hospitals and making generic as well as patented drugs affordable, the fight between the stakeholders will not be resolved. In conclusion, the pharma sector is too critical to be left alone to the whims of the market, and therefore there is an urgent need for all the stakeholders to actualize strategies that would benefit the poor and the needy.
Did you know you can buy a few drugs without a prescription or approval from a medical professional such as a doctor, pharmacist, or a vet? These are known as over-the-counter pharmaceuticals and are sold in a retail store or pharmacy.